The VVN Music Podcast, Episode 6. Covering the veteran artists from pop, rock, soul, country, folk, and blues that influence today's music world, this is the VVN Music Podcast. Today's show is brought to you by Audible.com. Get a free audiobook download and a 30-day free trial by going to audiotrial.com/VVN. Hi, and welcome to Episode 6. I'm Roger Wink, and on today's show we talk with former David Letterman drummer Anton Fig about his new album, touring with Joe Bonamassa and growing up with the influence of music in South Africa. But first, it's the thing we're loving this week. We had the pleasure to see the final stop of the Wheels of Soul Tour 2015 with the Tedeschi Trucks Band, Sharon Jones and the Dap Kings, and Doyle Bramhall II. While some really bad weather caused Bramhall's set to be canceled, we still were able to witness some great R&B. Tedeschi Trucks have one of the tightest bands of its kind, and Susan Tedeschi has one of the best blues voices today. But their greatness was overshadowed by Sharon Jones and the Dap Kings. For those unfamiliar, Sharon Jones spent much of her early career as a corrections officer at Rikers Island in New York and as an armored car driver. But in the 90s, she finally received a musical break when she did backing vocals for Lee Fields. The owners of the French label Pure Records heard her and recorded 2 tracks on an album they released by the Soul Providers. A couple of years later, the Soul Providers became the Dap Kings, and the new Daptone Records reunited Jones with the group to record the album Dap Dippin' with Sharon Jones and the Dap Kings. The sound was raw 1960s funk a la James Brown, and the careers of one of the finest true soul funk bands performing today was formed. The Dap Kings have also had a very successful career as a backing band with their highest profile work with Mark Ronson on Amy Winehouse's Back to Black album as one of the 2 bands on the smash single Uptown Funk. On the Wheels of Soul tour, the band took the stage and kept the crowd enraptured with their superb musicianship and Jones's mesmerizing, gritty vocals. They are one of the most exciting groups on the scene today and one not to be missed. The show and tour ended with Tedeschi Trucks bringing Jones and the group and Bramhall up on stage for The Letter, Tell Mama, and a medley of Sing a Simple Song and I Want to Take You Higher. A perfect end to an amazing night of soul and blues music. Sharon Jones and the Dap Kings will release their first holiday album. It's a holiday soul party later this year. Britain has had a number of iconic music magazines over the years, with Sounds being at the forefront of emerging styles from 1970 to 1991. One of its contributors, Gary Bushell, has written the book Riff Raff, Rebels and Rock Gods, an extreme memoir from the golden years of rock, about his days covering the second great coming of British music in styles like ska, new bod, oi, and new wave. Originally published last year, the book is now available in audio form on Audible.com, and you can listen to Riff Raff, Rebels, and Rock Gods for free with our special offer. Just type in the address audibletrial.com/VVN to sign up for the 30-day free trial and receive your free audiobook. Plus, if that title isn't to your liking, they have over 180,000 other titles to choose from. Remember, that's audibletrial.com/VVN. Our guest today is Anton Fig, probably best known as the drummer for David Letterman's World's Most Dangerous Band and when he changed networks, the CBS Orchestra, but also a musician who has worked with a long list of artists since the 70s. Fig was born and raised in South Africa, but moved to Boston in his late teens to study at the New England Conservatory of Music. After graduation in 1976, he moved to New York, where he started a career as a freelance musician. In 1978, he played drums on Ace Frehley's solo album and later was a member of Frehley's Comet. He was also a ghost drummer for Kiss, playing on all but one track on the album Dynasty and all of the tracks on Unmasked. Outside of his Kiss and Ace Frehley work, he played with a long line of artists including Bob Dylan, B.B. King, Warren Zevon, Peter Frampton, and many more, along with being a member of the group Spider. In 1986, Anton joined the Paul Shaffer-led band for David Letterman's Late Night Show, a position he would hold for 29 years. Over that time, Fig would have the opportunity to play with practically every artist of the time, and between his Letterman gig and his history of studio work, he was able to assemble an amazing lineup of guest stars for his first album, Figments. The album was released on Friday, August 14th, after having a limited run of copies in 2002. Joining Fig on the album are such artists as Brian Wilson, Ace Frehley, Blondie Chaplin, Ivan Neville, the late Richie Havens, Sebastian Bach, Al Cooper, Chip Taylor, Chris Spedding, Donald Duck Dunn, and Booker T and the MGs. Fig is currently touring with Joe Bonamassa. We had the honor of talking with him from the road. You're out on the road right now, right?
Yeah, I'm on the road with Joe Bonamassa. At the moment, we were in Maine last night. We are heading, after a couple of dates in Ohio, we go out and play Red Rocks Amphitheater in Colorado, and then work our way down the West Coast and end up at the Greek Theater in Los Angeles. It's a really nice tour. It's a tour based on the music of the Three Kings, which is B.B. Albert and Freddie. And so this is not music from Joe's, record catalog. It's just specific music of these three guys that he sort of reinterprets.
You've worked with Joe for quite a few years, right?
Yeah, I have. What happened was the producer, Kevin Shirley, who is someone I've known for a long time and done many, many records with, going back to a record in South Africa, probably in the early 80s, said that Joe was doing a record and he wanted me to play on it. And I think the first one I wasn't able to do, but the second one I was. And then since then, I've played on most of his recordings since about, at least like 7-8 years ago, something like that.
Yeah, and Joe is fairly prolific, so that's quite a few recordings.
Yeah, I mean, there's at least one project, sometimes 2 or 3 a year.
Now that the Letterman show is over, are you finding yourself kind of reinvigorated creatively with all your extra time?
Yeah, well, it's different. For 29 years, I went in there virtually, not every day, but virtually every day, every week, with a week off here and there. And then when the show ended, I sort of took a month off and canceled any gigs I had. But I knew that I really wanted to get out there and sort of be working on a regular basis because that's what I'm used to doing. And so now this work is completely different. I mean, the Letterman show was live to the extent that there were 550 people in the audience and, a few million on TV. This is different where it's like anywhere from 2,500 people to, 12,000 people in the audience. And you're playing the same set over and over. So it's a completely different thing. On the show, I was able to play so many different styles of music and then go out in the night and play with bands. Whereas when you do a show, you kind of distill it down to its basics. So you're not necessarily using everything you have. You kind of have to specialize it just for that time. So it's very interesting, actually, because it's something that I have experienced it a bit, but not all that much. And of course, touring is very different to doing the show and then walking home and having dinner and then going out to a club afterwards. I think it's fun. It's actually really, in answer to your question, yes, it is invigorating and exciting and fun because it's just so different for me right now.
Now, tomorrow is the release of your new album, Figments. Yeah. And it's a new release, but it's actually more of an archive set because it had been released in a limited edition about, 12 years ago?
Yeah, that is correct. The record did come out then to a small release. And, I I felt like there was a big change happening in my life with the show ending and going out on the road. And I sort of felt like I didn't have to reinvent myself, but I needed to kind of put myself out more so I would be known for more than just being the Letterman drummer, even though I'm on a zillion records and all that stuff. And so this record was, not heard by all that many people. And I listened to it and I thought, it still sounds relevant. It's like the kind of record that it is. It's not like sort of fad oriented. It's just really good musicians and really good songs. And I thought, well, it's a little unorthodox, but why not put it out again for people to hear?
Did you make any changes at all to it from the original release to this one?
No, it's the same record. But, there's some really choice little pieces on it. Like at the very end of the last song, there's a section with Brian Wilson's vocals just by itself, which is just really fantastic. A few things have happened. Like some people, like Oz Noy plays a fantastic guitar solo. He is quite well known now. He wasn't known at all in those days. Richie Havens has passed away since then. It's kind of, I don't know how to say it. The record, it's the same record, but the times have shifted around it, so certain things become, and there has been a big resurgence in Brian Wilson as well. So it's like the world has changed around the record, which, but it certainly doesn't sound like a time capsule thing. It just still sounds great to me.
You've obviously played with a lot of artists over the years, both outside the Letterman show and on the Letterman show. How did you go about choosing and getting the different guests? Because you have a ton of guests on this album.
Yeah. I didn't get guests just for the sake of stacking the roster and, attracting interest that way. Just about all the people that I played on, I didn't really have to cold call. I knew them and I had played with them. And so over the years, I'd kind of gathered together a body of songs that I'd either written or co-written. And, with the advance of digital and all that stuff, and where people can make records, without having to go into the studio and pay a fortune, because you can do the drums at home now. You can, people can send you their parts and that kind of thing. It became, a viable option for me to make a record like this. And so what I tried to do was just group the right people together. I would think of the song and think, who would be the best people to do it? Like, More Than Friends, it just seems so perfectly suited to Richie Havens' vocals. And he came by to my house, and we set up a mic in the bedroom, and I was in the studio, which was just off the living room. And that's how we recorded the vocals. In the case of Hand on My Shoulder, Blondie Chaplin was the lead singer. He's a good friend of mine. I've been in bands with him for years from South Africa, and he played in the Stones for about 12 years, background. He was one of the backgrounds. But he was also the singer on Sail on Sailor, the Beach Boys hit. He was the lead vocals on that. And I thought, wouldn't that be great if I could get Brian Wilson on? And I was able to. So it made sense having Brian and Blondie, and now Blondie is playing in the band. This past tour that Brian did, Blondie is very much in the band, but this was kind of done, before any of that even happened.
how can I sow all these seeds I've planted? Is there enough rain to feed this earth I'm turning?
I was going to say Blondie Chaplin is one of the most underrated, I won't say unrecognized, but someone who deserved to have a lot more recognition in his career.
Oh yeah, you know, he's incredible. I've been in a band. We had a band called Scully, which is a South African slang name for a sort of what would you call them? Like a ducktail, they used to call them in England, and you know, just someone sort of near-do-well kind of person. And it was a great band. He was a fantastic writer, fantastic singer, fantastic guitarist. He's one of the guys I definitely plan on seeing when we get to California.
He's on like 3 cuts on the album, correct?
Yes, and yeah, they're all beautiful. I mean, his vocals are so fantastic, and the writing. When
you did the writing, you kind of implied that you had these songs kind of in the vault and so forth. Were any of the songs written with the guests, the people that were guesting on the album, or were these mostly things that you had written yourself previously?
Well, like the Hand on My Shoulder, the song with Blondie, I wrote the music, and I sent him the music, and he kind of, I remember we were out in California, and he started writing the song on top of all the chords were there in the form and everything. And he started writing some words on top and some melodies on top. And then, so when we had it at that stage, I was kind of knowing that I was kind of getting a record together. So it was pretty obvious for him, you know, to sing that. In the case of Inside Out, that was a song where, again, I'd written all the music and everything, and I'd sent it to this guy, Max Cole, and he kind of put words and some melody on top of that, and then I would just kind of had a really good song. So it was a matter of finding who to sing, and I'd always loved Ivan Neville, and I knew him, and I played with him a bit, and I asked him to do it, and at first he said he wasn't sure if the song was too poppy for him. But I said, look, I'm sure you could do a really great job with it. And so he said he would try, you know, and he sang, he did a fantastic job with it.
Turning me inside out, turning me inside out, turning you every day without you. It's turning me inside out, turning me inside out. Still I know I must find a way to forget you.
Every song was kind of different. The one, there's a song 3-4 Folk, and it's an instrumental that I wrote, and I wanted to it reminded me not to put myself in the same league, but it reminded me of sort of a Weather Report composition, because the way that a lot of their compositions are, it's not like verse, chorus. They sort of have a section, say an A section, and then a B section, and then the C section. You don't always come backwards and forwards to the refrain, so to speak. And so I got Amit Chatterjee, who's a fantastic Indian vocalist and guitarist, to sing on it, and he played with Joe Zawinul from Weather Report. And I got Richard Boner, who's an incredible bass player, who's also played with Joe Zawinul. And so it was like sort of little associations like that really meant something to me, you know. In the case of Know Where You Go, which is a song that I wrote, the words and the music and everything, and I wanted to make it kind of heavy, so I got Ace Frehley to play guitar on it. I remember he was on tour with Kiss at the time. He just sort of came to my house for an hour. I put down a bunch of guitar solos, and then I kind of worked with him after he left. And, you know, my history with him goes way back. And then I got Richie Scarlett, who plays in his band, and I got Sebastian Bach. So it's like who I just played on his record.
Keeping me alive.
were not like big stretches and things for me. These are all like people. I've been lucky in my career in that I've been able to play in a lot of different camps, sort of pretty authentically, and so I've got like a huge pool of people that I've somehow, I mean, when I look back and go, oh, I played with the Ghost, have you ever played with so-and-so? I go, yes. Have you played with so-and-so? I go, yes. They could be like completely different, but somehow through my life, through the Letterman show and records and that, I've just been able to cover a very wide range of musicians.
Who is singing on the track When the Good Die Young, which is a really, really nice track?
Yeah, that is Chip Taylor. Chip Taylor wrote and he wrote Angel of the Morning. And I can't quite remember how I met him, but I have been very good friends with him for a long time and have played on a ton of his records. And we got into a bit of a groove where we were writing songs together for a while. And that was one of the songs that we wrote. And, I have a few more with him that I should bring out at some point. But
sometimes, whenever I need you, there's a life on the line, it's mine. I just wake up and I get the sign in time.
I would kind of just hang on to all these gems because they would sort of happen. It wasn't like we wrote the stuff and then we did the record. It just, it sort of evolved over quite a long, pretty much glacial pace, a song here, a song there, a situation here, a situation there. And then it sort of all kind of came together. And, and I just wanted to, even though I am a drummer and a drummer is expected to put out a record of drums kind of thing, I wanted to put out a record of just really good music and really good songs and then it would be tied together because there's different styles there, but it would be under the auspices of my production and me playing drums and me putting the whole thing together, that it would kind of have a unified sound.
Well, it does. It covers a lot of genres, but it does have a unified sound. And, as you just said, and now, did you record this over a number of, like, over a year or 2 years? Was there a long process in getting to the 2003 release?
It was over 2 years because when you do when a normal quote unquote band does a record, you come in and you do basic tracks and maybe you get like the drums and the bass and the rhythm and that sort of right away. And then, the singer might come in or the lead guitarist or the background and the record is still working. But when you're a one-man operation and you're running off to the TV show, every day, the project has to stop. And, the amount of work that goes into each song, certainly in this particular case, was, it took a lot and took a lot of thought. I wanted it to sound like a band, and yet I wanted, if you decided to focus in on any instrument, that you could follow that storyline all the way through the song and that it would be interesting. And I wanted to kind of not smooth out the rough edges, but make it really nice, but still have it a little bit raw and still have mistakes. And so, for me, it's like the musicians played, and then I would sit there almost like a collage maker, and I like this piece, I like that piece. So I would kind of massage it and make it so they played great, but then I also got a chance to just kind of use the pieces that I wanted to and sort of make it the way that I wanted to make it. And that kind of thing takes a long time. Now, for example, we did the Lost Joe record, which we recorded a few weeks ago in Nashville. And we were in the studio for 8 days or something, and we recorded about 14 songs. And it sounds fantastic and vibrant. And, that's another way to do a record. But for me to do the record that I did with all the different people and not having like sort of, the same rhythm section, there's different guitarists and bass players on every track. it just took an incredibly long time and a lot of work to do.
You mentioned you did some of the recording in your own home. Out of curiosity, since it was done so many years ago, what kind of software were you using at that time as far as the recordings go?
It was Pro Tools. It just wasn't Pro Tools as we know today. But I mean, it was actually. It wasn't like version 2 or 3. I might have started around about 3 or 4, somewhere around there. But you know, in the beginning, I would take the drums into the studio, record onto tape, transfer it digitally, you know, into Pro Tools, and then work on Pro Tools. And, you know, certain things had to be done. Like, you know, when I did Brian Wilson's vocals, I had to go out to California and do it we actually did it in the studio where they remixed Pet Sounds, which was great. The guy showed me like the original 8-track or a tape of Pet Sounds. It was fantastic. It was like seeing I don't know what, the Holy Grail or something. But, you know, if we did Hammond organ, we had to. But plenty of musicians came up with double basses and played in my apartment. Plenty of people came up and sang. Plenty of people, you know, did guitars and all that stuff. You know, I mean, the basic editing was there. It was obviously you know, the software improved so fast and so much. And the bit rate and the sample rate and all that, you know, changed a bit. But, you know, when I put the record on, it still sounds fine. And we mixed it at home and everything as well. So certainly it's a viable way to make a record.
Oh, definitely. I've talked to a number of other artists. The group Chicago, they did their whole last album in hotel rooms while they were touring.
Right. Well, you can. You know, this is the thing. There's certain records where you just really want to have the live interaction amongst everybody. And there's nothing like it, going into the room and all playing together, like I just did with Joe's last thing. In fact, you know, there's nothing like it. But, you know, there's also another way that you can do it. If you want to do it that way, you know, certain people won't ever do it that way. And a lot of people won't ever do it the other way anymore. But, you know, I get sent stuff. I've got a studio at home where my drums are set up now, and people send me tracks, and I just, you know, go in and play them. Now, not all music is suited to that kind of isolated drum thing. You know, you want to have instantaneous interaction amongst the other musicians. But where the music can be done that way, you know, you can get a pretty good result. I think the danger is people tend to, because they sometimes tend to make everything perfect and make the sounds perfect and make everything perfect, and it loses the charm. You know, sometimes the nice things are in the imperfections and the rough edges. You know what I mean? So there's no point giving it to a great drummer, changing your sound, quantizing it, you know, so much that it's lost its original feel. And I definitely tried not to do that at all. You know, I was careful about how I edited, but I definitely tried to preserve all that stuff.
There are a couple of tracks on the album that have a definite, actually there's a lot of tracks that have a world feel to them, whether it be Latin or whatever, but there are definitely a couple that have an African feel to it. And I know that you were born and raised in South Africa.
Right.
And you were there until you were, about 17, 18?
Yes.
I was curious. You have talked in the past about how the government in South Africa, because of the times when you were growing up, had some control over what you heard, what you saw, and so forth. So I was curious as to what type of music you heard and influenced you when you were growing up there, and how that translated into the sound on the at least the African sounding tracks on the albums.
Yeah, well, we heard a lot of the African music, and by that I mean, if you listen to the Graceland record by Paul Simon, and you listen to the backing tracks, that's the kind of music that we heard quite a lot of. So, and, you know, although you could only play with, like, white and black in those days could only play on the university campuses or in private homes. And so we did do a fair amount of that kind of playing and that kind of interaction, because, you know, musicians they weren't like the sect that were in power. You know, that was a small minority, and certainly did not reflect the feelings of all the white people there at all. It was just a certain group of people that were in power there. So I got to hear a lot of African music. But the thing was is that we were very far away from the rest of the world. I mean, there was no internet there. We actually had no television. You know, you had records. You could see people, very few people came down. So you actually didn't see many people at all. So a lot of the stuff you just had to kind of imagine and make up. And we also had, we used to listen to, I forget what it's called, it was the radio station in Lorenzo Marx. On shortwave, Lorenzo Marx became Mozambique. It was shortwave radio that got through to England. So we would hear sort of like English music, and the BBC was playing also American music at that point. So it was that, and then there was African music at home. Funnily enough, the people in power in South Africa loved country and western. So we heard, and I'm talking about the more like the Jim Reeves style country and western, the original kind of country and western, as opposed to like now it's sort of a lot more, some of it's a lot more poppy than Patsy Cline, if you know what I mean. But, you know, so I heard a lot of stuff. And then my parents, my mother played piano, and they had a lot of classical records and a lot of jazz records. So I got a little off topic, but, you know, I did hear quite a bit of African music, and I was able to play. I mean, I substituted on Paul Simon's gig quite a few times because they knew I could play that, and I got to play with Hugh Masekela and do a little tour with him because that kind of music, obviously, I'd heard it around me enough that I could just kind of sit down and play it with the right feel.
Back in the late 70s, you toured with a couple guys that, to me, like Blondie Chaplin, should have had a lot more success than they did, and that was Robert Gordon and Link Wray.
Oh,
and any stories as far as touring with them? Because, you know, that was real rockabilly at that time.
Oh, yeah, it was fantastic. Well, you know, Robert always had really good bands. And, I mean, he had Link for a long time. Then after that, he had Danny Gatton, who's a fantastic guitarist. And after that, he had Chris Spedding, who's also a fantastic guitarist, English guitarist. The time with Link, it was so exciting for me because I guess Robert's drummer went off to play with Dylan. This was around the time of Street Legal. And so I got the gig. I was in a rock band, and somehow the bass player went off to Dylan as well. And so I sort of moved over to the Robert gig because somehow I'd gotten to know them slightly through the band I was in. And I went off to Europe, and he played to just rabid crowds. I mean, they were the kind of clubs where you stand, and I forget what it was, maybe, 1,000, 1,500 people, but just rabid. It was a super exciting time playing with them and playing rockabilly, which I also realized I knew because I had all these Bill Haley and the Comet records when I was a kid, and Gene Vincent and that kind of stuff. So that 50s stuff kind of came down to South Africa a little bit. So I knew how to play that. And then playing with Link was so exciting. He was, a few decades older than me. It seemed like it was just like, really old, although now I'm not thinking that way at all. But it's, he was fantastic. It was just so dynamic and so the real thing. And Robert was also like so true to what he did. And it was incredibly exciting. And, yeah, I mean, they both should have been superstars.
That first Robert Gordon with Link Wray album with Red Hot and that was such a fantastic album.
Right, so I joined them after that. I joined them. Then they had a one called Fresh Fish Special, and that's when that just came out, and then that's when we went to Europe. But they were still really big with Red Hot and everything. Oddly enough, Robert never wanted to play Red Hot. And the people, would be screaming for it, screaming, and he didn't want to play it.
Any thoughts on your part as far as going out on the road with your own band, or Are you planning anything in support of the album?
Well, it's just because of what the record is. It's just, I think, a little too difficult. And certainly you can't recreate that record. So then it would be one band that would sort of approximate everything. I think that realistically, I think the only way to do it would be if I was lucky enough that a song off the record did something somehow or other, and I don't know how that would be possible or what. It's not impossible. It has to get into a movie or people just really get it or something. Then if there was some demand for it and some interest, then it would be worth it, I don't think just to do it cold, I don't think I would do that. For the next bunch of months, I'm going to be playing with Joe anyway. So, I'm really enjoying that, but I'm wanting to, get the record out there as much as possible and see if it can do anything, because I really think that if people heard it, it's a record. It's sort of made in the view of how records were made. Like, you can kind of really listen to it and really enjoy a song and get into it and then sort of move on to the next song. There's a lot of information there.
Well, there's a number of really, really great songs on there. I mean, especially, I love the Ivan Neville one. And the Richie Havens, too, is also a great song, So there's a lot of potential there.
Yeah. So I just want to, and I don't know how, this is one way I'm doing it. I'm just trying to put it out again. I mean, people don't normally do that. I'm just saying, you missed it the first time. Let's give it another try.
Any word on anything you might be doing with Paul Shaffer and the rest of the band at all?
There's no word on that. I mean, we do the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame every year. I don't know if we'll be called for it again next year. We did it last year, and I got to play with I got to play with Stevie Wonder and John Legend together, and Bill Withers, and I also got to play with Paul and Ringo together. So it's a great gig, but and I'd love to do it, but I don't know if Paul gets called. I assume he will call us, and then it depends. I mean, if I have other commitments, because I don't know what the date is, will be whether I can do it or not. So. It's, Paul actually did call us for a date, and then it didn't happen. So, there might be stuff. It's hard to say.
Are you missing not playing with that group and the whole thing in general?
Well, the band was fantastic. When the band got fired up, it was really great. And I never would have left the show under any circumstances. But once Dave said he was, he called us into his office one day and he said, I've decided I'm going to retire. And half an hour later, we were on stage, and then he announced it to the audience and stuff. And so that was like, it was just, okay, well, that's that. And that was about a year out from when it finally ended. Once he had said that he was done, then I just said, well, okay, so now, one door's closing, another door's opening. And when I'm out on tour, it's a different rhythm. My family's not used to me being away. I'm usually like go do the gig and come home and then go out and play again. It's a great tour, so I'm having fun doing this too, so, and I did it for 29 years, like maybe 5,400 shows. So while I do miss it because it's a great band, great people, and we'll never be able to put that group, not the band, but the whole thing back together again. At the same time, it's important to look forward and keep moving. So I tend to sort of focus more on the forward movement.
Well, listen, I really appreciate you talking to us, and I wish you all the luck with the new album and getting it out there.
Thank you very much, and thanks for talking to me.
Our thanks to Anton Fig for taking time out from touring to speak with us. We'll be back soon with another edition of the VVN Music Podcast. For the latest news on the veteran artists of rock, pop, soul, country, folk, and blues, check in at vvnmusic.com. And if you have any comments or questions about the website or this podcast, please send them to vvnnetwork@gmail.com. Our theme music is performed by Yahar. This program was recorded on August 17th, 2015, and is a production of the VVN Network, Copyright 2015.